Um, Hi students. I'm going to record the video for the third week, in which we are going to focus on the topic of exceptions. So in the past week, I received quite a few emails from the students, either asking for help with the programming exercises or requesting an extension on for more time to finish them. So both are absolutely fine. So in the future, if you have difficulties with your assignments, just let me know, okay? So, but please be aware that I don't check emails regularly during the weekends. So if you want a very fast help from me, better send me an email during the weekdays. Okay, so in this week we're going to focus on the topic of exceptions. So exceptions is essential in Java. In Java, exception is basically another name for error. So it means runtime error. So here, uh, in this chapter, we're going to spend the first four subchapters on the topic of exceptions. And you only need to focus on these four sub chapters and ignore the rest. Okay, so feel free to ignore them. So let's talk about arrows. So if we talk about arrow, there are basically three types of arrow. The first one is the compile time arrow. The compile arrow, compile arrow. Okay, so this arrow is like when you are writing a sentence, it includes either grammar errors or they say or they typos. So by you don't even need to read the sentence, but by just checking, but by just using either Word or some other softwares to check the words, you should be able to identify. Okay, here it is an error. Okay, so this is the most basic arrow in Java, and if you have this arrow, when you're typing your program in any IDE like Eclipse, you're going to say the small red cross on the right hand side of your program, which means that it includes the compile time error. Okay, and this is very easy for us to fix because you know there is an error. You cannot even run your program. Okay, so and there are two other types of error. The second one is called runtime error. Okay, so runtime error is something like, say you have a sentence which does not have any grammar error or typo, but the sentence itself is wrong. So either you use some words like either and, you should instead you should use either or, right? So every word looks fine, but by combining them together, you will be able to identify the error. So this is called a runtime error, and this type of error is also not very difficult for us to fix, because when you run the code, you will be able to say something called exception. So exception is basically the runtime error. So it means that your program, when you are your program is, you can run your program, but it does not give you the output at all. It just terminate before it should reach the end. Okay, so before the end. Okay, so and the last type of error is called logic error. So this means that you have your program totally fine, you can just run it, get the output, but the result itself is not correct. So basically you implement the wrong logic in your program, and this kind of error is very hard for us to identify and to debug. So today we're going to focus on the second one called exception. Okay, so exception basically is an object that describes there is an unusual or erroneous situation when Java is running a program. So uh, when you say when we face an exception, we basically have three different options. So the options we have is either to ignore it or handle it when it occurs, or throw it out. So basically we want to handle it in another place in the program. we can say we want to throw it out. So by ignoring it, it's like you don't use any caution or countermeasure to do that. And basically this one means that you will get an error. Your program will terminate early and tell you that it receives a runtime exception or runtime error. Okay, terminate early. And the most common way is just to handle it whenever it occurs, like so that you don't have to delay the problem solving to the other programs. So in our in this lecture, we're going to focus on the second two one, because the first one is basically nothing. So here, let's look at the first program where we should observe an exception or runtime error. So this program is called so here we have a class called 0, and here in this main function we have a numerator and denominator, and we want to get the result between them. But unfortunately the denominator is 0, and here because we want to divide something with 0 by 0, and this means that we're going to receive an exception. This is wrong, right? And so by doing so, we're going to observe an exception. So and here, let's say when you execute the program, this is the output that you will see. It tells you that we find an exception in the main in thread main, basically in the main method of 0.java. Okay, and the exception name is called java.long.arithmetic exception, and it tells you divide by 0. Okay, so java.long is short for language. Okay, so this is the most basic package in Java, and then this is the arithmetic exception, and it tells you so what kind of error did you see. And so when you are doing your programming, if you see such an exception, okay, and if you have no idea about what is the exception, because there are many types of exceptions, sometimes you just from the name you don't know what does that mean. Okay, what we should do is just say to copy and paste this exception name to Google or to a website called Stack Overflow. Basically, Stack Overflow is the best question and answering platform for programmers. So if you just copy and paste this arrow or this exception to this website, you'll be able to see numerous threads, so in which the other programs also say encounter this exception, and the other people just help them to fix it. So from those replies, you should be able to see what to do. Okay, so and then let's say the most common way to handle an exception, it is the second way. Basically, we want to handle it whenever it occurs. So, and we're going to use this one called try catch statement to handle it. So here, try catch is kind of like if else. It's so if we have an if, then we have an else, right? So this is if else. For try catch, we have similar things. We try something, and here instead try is basically a block of programs in which you will so there is a chance for you to get an exception. And here we have catch and a bracket. So in the bracket, you just tell say what you want to catch, what kind of exception, the type of exception. So for example, previously we got the arithmetic. Previously here we got the arithmetic exception, and here you can just say we got catch we catch arithmetic exception. So for that piece of code, if you surround this one, if you surround this operation with a try and catch arithmetic exception, and here is the way for you to handle it. Basically, for example, you can say, okay, system.out system.out.println. Okay, say, okay, exception encountered, received. Okay, so here in the catch block, you basically want to tell Java what. So in case you observe such an exception, what kind of behavior do you want to perform? So here I'm going to use an example to do that. Okay, so here we have a program in which we ask the user to type in something, which corresponds to the product code, and we expect the product code to be something like this. In the tenth character, the 10th character is basically a character we call zone. Zone is a single character, and which tells you, okay, what kind of zone it is. And then we have a number of district. We expect starting from the 4th to the 7th, starting from 4th to, so basically in the characters whose position, whose index are from 4, 5, 6 and 7. So we want to get the substring with such index and assign them to a string to an integer called district. So it's a number which tells you what kind of district it is. And so if the zone is larger than if the zone is R and the district value is larger than 2000, so we want to increase the band value by 1. So otherwise, because here you can say that if we type in a string, if we just type in the user typing a random string where the whose length is shorter than 10, then basically you get nothing with this statement. They will throw out an exception called say string index out of bound exception. And in case that the user just typing a string that is too short, you just say you want to the way for us to handle such an exception is to print out a message. You say improper code length, and then so here in the second one, okay, because we are trying to convert the substring with whose index are 4, 5, 6, 7 to a integer. It's possible. So if the substring here are like ABCD, basically you cannot convert it to an integer. And again, here you will receive an error. The or exception. The type of exception is called number format exception. And so the way for us in this program, the way for us to handle it is to print out a message saying that the district is not numeric. So if everything is all right, we will ask the user to type in another code, and when we just continue to do this. So if the user just type in a code which is XXX, we'll just terminate. So this is the logic of the program. And here you can see that we use the try and catch. We use the try statement to surround this 5 lines of code, in which it's possible for us to get so either the string index out of bound exception or number format exception. So let's look at the behavior of this program. So here, if in the first run, so if the user just type in the code, okay, trv so 2475 a5r dash 14. So the character that corresponds to the zone is R, and this substring starting 2475 will be translated to an integer which corresponds to the district. So here we got no error. So and then it's fine. And then if but in the third try, if the user type in the code, okay, TRL2K74, and so here we will encounter the problem because the substring that we will try to convert to integer does not only include numerics or digits. So we have a character k. So we're going to observe the exception called number format exception. So here what we expect to see is district is non-numeric plus the code that the user just type in, and this is the result. So it prints out the error message. And so here in this test case, if the user just type in a string which is too short, and then it will trigger this exception called string index out of bound exception, and we are expected to see a output saying that the improper code length plus the code. So this is what we are going to see, correct? Okay, so this is basically the logic of the program. So here from this example, I hope that you can get an idea of how to handle exception. We basically use try to surround the part of code that an exception may be thrown out, and then we have catch statement. So what kind of exception do we want to catch? Okay, so some of you may wonder, okay, how do I know? So if I have a big program, how do I know which part of the code may cause an exception? And yes, this is a very good question. When you just do not have sufficient programming experience, this is like a open-ended question for you. You don't know where it is. So my suggestion is that you just write your program in a regular way, and then before you send your code, before you submit your code or send your code to your colleagues, you just try it. You just use different input and input to try it, to see if there is an exception. And if you observe an exception, you will know where do they occur, so that you can apply this try and catch statement. And also, so if you just observe an exception, you will be able to know what type of exception it is. So you know what kind of type are you going to fill in over here. Okay, so this is my suggestion. Okay, and here I want to go to this one called exception classes. And the exception class in Java, we have many types of exceptions. So we have the so this is the structure. If you are familiar with the inheritance topic that we discussed in the second week, you should be familiar with this diagram. So in which we show the parent class and children class relationship. So here we can say that the exception class just says inherits the throwable class, and then under it we have many different types of exceptions. Say runtime exception, we have arithmetic exception, index out of bound, and null point. We have illegal exception, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so in the first sense, you may feel, okay, how do I know so the specific meaning of each exception? So my way to handle it, because yes, there are just too many different types of exceptions in Java. There are around 25 such different types, and it's hard for you to memorize all of them. So what I will do is that when I just write the try catch block, I would like to use just exception rather than the detailed type of the exception. So here, exception, just use exception E. So basically, with this statement, you want to say, okay, as long as an exception is observed, no matter what kind of type it is, I'm going to handle it in this way. So my way to handle it out is just say string. So I will organize a string and print it out. Say, okay, an exception is observed. Okay, so here. Okay, so also you can throw out an exception, and so this behavior is rarely observed for say entry level programmers, but it's good to know. So you can throw out an exception in your program. You can throw out an exception, and this is the way for you to handle an exception in the third way, which is to allow you to handle the exception in another place rather than where it is where it occurs. So for example here, let's go over here, let's go to the program. So okay, yes, here we have a program, and we know that so in this program what we want to do is say we have two values, min and max, between, so we basically want the user to type in a value between 25 and 40, and in case that the user just input a value which is not in this range, where we want to say throw it out, we want to throw out this exception. So in the definition, in the declaration of the main function, we just add this statement, say throws out of range exception. Basically, this statement tells Java compiler that this function, it's possible for this function to throw out an exception. And here, so first we just create the exception, and then so if the user just typing a value which is either less than the mean value or larger than the max value, we just throw out the problem or the exception. So then this is the logic of the program. For example, if the user just typing a value 69, we're going to, and this main function is going to throw out the exception, and then what we are going to say is that in the main function we observe a out of range exception, and so the error message is this, is just over here. Input value out of range. Yes, here we have input value out of range. So that is the other way to handle an exception. But as I said previously, it's not good for you to throw out an exception. Basically, if you throw out an exception, you will expect someone else to handle it. But if they don't, then your program crashes at the wrong time. You don't want this to happen. So better handle it at the place where you know the exception may happen. Okay? So and last, I want to talk about I/O exceptions. So I/O means input and output. So for example, when you want to read a file or write something to a file, it means a input or output. So but say when we just say read a file, it's possible that the file does not exist, or even though the file exists, it may happen that you don't have the privilege to read it or write it, or say the file may not contain the data that we expect. So our exception is so in case any of them happen, we will observe an error exception. So this is very common for you to have a program that does input or output. So the way to handle it is here. Okay, so it's possible. So there are basically two ways. Either you throw the exception out to let someone else handle it. So like what this program does, it just says, okay, it's possible with this declaration you say, okay, this main function may throw out an error exception, and the thing that triggers it is over here. Okay, so let's say here it just say it wants to open a file called test.txt and write to it, because we have a printer writer. It basically wants to write some content to the file, and the content it wants to write is like get some random value and add it with 10 and append this value to the file. Okay, so this is what this program does. So and here we can say that is if in case that the file exists and this is the result we can observe it, just keep typing in different numbers, and then so this is what it does. But just in case that this file does not exist, then it will throw out an error exception, and which will trigger the crash of your whole program. Okay, like what we observed previously in the example over here. Yes, in the out of range example. So the other way to do it is this. Okay, so this is I highly recommend you to do it to handle the exception that may happen at input and output in this way. So you surround the code that may with try and catch exception, catch IO exception. Okay, so in the try statement you have this print writer output out file. So and then you have the line where you want to do the write until the line where you want to do the out file dot print. Okay, out file dot print. So you surround all of them in the try statement, and in case anything wrong happens, they will just this block of the code will just throw out an error exception, so which is caught by this statement over here, so that you handle it over here. Okay, so this is a good way to do file input and output. Okay, so this is pretty much what we are going to cover in the third week. So enjoy your study.